as always, fashionably late. Let me get this live video shared. Un momento, un momento. Right. Guys, I'm just sharing the live feed. Put this on silent so as not to disturb us. Right, let's see. Almost got it. Just bloody hell, when the phone gets slow. Ya salam. It's like super slow. Right. And is that finally done? Ya salam. That's done. Alright. Right, I do have my Coke. I actually even bought some, I bought a bit of a semi-refill with it. He took down a mafia earlier today, Sheikh Adam. Allah, I don't know about that. I'll have to catch up. Alaykum as-salam, people. Ahlan wa sahlan bil qawm. Inna alhamdulillah wa kafah. Wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulih al-Mustafa. Wa ala ibadihi alladhina irtada. Wa man bihudahum ihtada. Wa bi athari ahli al-madinati tafah. Wa ba'd. Fasalamu Allahi ala al-qawm. Ahlan wa sahlan. Tony Cipriani. Alright, what a cool name. Moncler, where are ya? I had no idea. Right, people, we've got a hell of a lot of questions. An interesting week, as always, has passed us by. Could I recommend a good tafsir book? Solomon, alright, ¿cómo te vas? ¿Qué pasa? What's going on? What's going on, Solomon? Right, Sheikh Adam is in trouble in Sri Lanka right now. I don't know anything about that. I hope he's not. I hope he's okay. Yes, sir, Allah. Let's take our... Look at that. Ya salam. Let me mix in my special potion to get the night started. So this is the life of vampires, huh? With... What? He's about to get arrested. What the hell? What the hell? Seriously, whoa. I'm... Yassar Allah, my du'as are with him. I'll reach out to him and try and find out after this dars. Let me just mix in this special potion, people. You hear that sound? Wah, music to my ears. Right, so let's get this show on the road. The guns are not, unfortunately. I need to hit the gym. Right. Is Red Bull Light tasty? I don't know. I always mix mine, so but it's okay. It's good. Let's get these. A lot of questions have come through. I've got my Sam Crow glass here as well, people. Look at that as a refill right there. Sam Crow, people. Sam Crow, Sons of Anarchy. So, what are we going to be looking at? Which wax you using? I just use this, I think, is it called gummy or something? I just pick it up from my local, I was going to say barbers, but we ought to say hairdressers. What is your understanding about hijab? Alright, Riddy, ahlan wa sahlan people. Look at that. Riddy, local, Brums, local and finest, tuning in all the way from the Mamlaka, Saudi Arabia. Right, now, is there a spider on my shoulder? I don't know. Is there a spider on my shoulder? I sure hope not. Right. Who wants to come to my gym class? Who the hell typed that from my... Is that one of my admin playing up? I just saw a Mufti Abu Layth message going out there saying, who wants to come to my gym class? Behave, lads, behave. Right, so let's take a look at some of these questions. We've got quite a few interesting ones already lined up. I'll go back and forth, back and forth. When Allah says in the Quran that a day is equal كألف سنة مما تعدون, it's like 1,000 days of what you, or in another verse, isn't it 50,000? But the point is that, look, the thing, Atif, look at that, people, Birmingham's very own muscled out Muslim, I won't say version, but ahead of Pitbull. Right there, tuning in. Ahlan wa sahlan, Ustad. Right, so, right, you know, in the Quran, where it says things like, and a day with your Lord is like 1,000 days of your counting. That, okay, there's two ways of understanding these. One is you take a very literal approach, say, oh, so it's 1,000 days. So 1 day is 24 hours and times 1,000. That's one way. That's not the intelligent way of doing things, right? This was addressing, look, whenever we're going to look at the Quran, we have to understand something. Who is the Quran primarily addressing? Who is the Quran primarily addressing? It's addressing humanity, but primarily it's being funneled through, if you like. It's the first recipients, the first effective community, the make or break deal of Islam are the Sahaba, the companions, Arabia, the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is who is being initially addressed. These people didn't view time quite like the way we do today. They didn't have it measured down to that scale, like 24 hours and so on and so forth. I'm not saying people in other places, obviously historically amongst certain kingdoms they did, but these people didn't have it like that. Okay, so I know in case you're going to say the Sumerian and the Babylonian kingdoms and stuff, but staying on point, that so Allah is addressing them and saying to them that, oh, you think this day is long, that is a different dimension of time. That's the better way to understand these things. So what I would say is that, right, so that is the better way of understanding this. So cool, people. So just so you understand that these things in the Quran to do with time and stuff like this are simply figurative. They're not actually literal like that. Okay. So, cool. Ahlan wa sahlan bil qawm. Right, so I hope that's answered that. So don't get too caught up in things like, oh, Allah says He created the heavens in this many days and the earth in this many days and He did this and that. This is figurative speech. That's all it is. Time space, in essence, is very different. Sid Khan, alright, look at that right there. Right, so it's important to understand these things, that today our understanding through science of time space, of time and space and the dimensions and things like this is different. Like we've got maybe a more objective, slightly more objective understanding of space-time and stuff like this, that it's not how Einstein explained, it's not how we thought it was. But Allah was addressing a people that had that kind of frame of mind. So He wouldn't use language like that, because they would then just disbelieve. You see, just as if Allah was to say in the Quran, if Allah was to address mankind by saying, did you know, people, that you actually live in, that this world is colorless, odorless, it has no smell, it has no sound. This is actually a silent, insipid universe that is colorless. That is actually a scientific fact. Okay, all these colors you are seeing are simply the way your brain is interpreting the light which reflects off them. They are not actual in essence. Like, so when I hold this up and you see a particular color, that is the way light is bouncing off that, and you are interpreting it, you and I, through our eyes. When I am speaking, what I am doing is obviously exerting certain pressures and these vibrations through which are being carried by these things called sound waves, and you are then interpreting those waves to mean this sound. That is scientific. That is a fact, that this universe is actually colorless, soundless, it's odorless, it's but if Allah spoke to us like that, nobody would have believed, even though it is actually scientifically more accurate. But people believe in the way they see things, and they make sense of the world. They don't want to be told from an absolute categorical perspective, because it will make them, they can't connect with that. So just to clarify, okay, so always keep these things in mind. Let's move on, people, let's move on. So Naman Hussein asks, what is your view to men wearing gold? That is a good question, and there's another question in here as well that ties into that. And I was asked about men wearing silk. Now, there is a... Right, I've just been... yeah, salam. I've just lost my page of questions. But let me deal with those two questions and I'll go back into that. You have to understand that there is a difference of opinion on these things. There is a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, that he said that Inna Allah qad harrama, that these two things, He had made them haram upon my ummah, upon ala dhukuri ummati, upon the males of this ummah. And in another riwayah that whosoever wears them is deprived of them in Jannah. This is in reference to silk and gold. What's interesting, however, is, you see, we have to take in a comprehensive approach. Okay, one approach is, we've got this hadith. The hadith is fine, and we've understood that. So many people have said, okay, these things are just haram. Fine, we just leave it to that. Those of you just tuning in, if you just like and click share the live feed, get it out there, let others benefit too, inshallah. Spread the corruption. Somebody's got to do it. Think about it. You can't just let the devil do it. Right, so let's get more evaluative. Right, now, so we're looking at... that is the understanding, that these hadith are there. Silk and gold. One question comes straight away, that why silk and why gold? Shall we take a look at the meanings? Because this is not a ritual. A ritual is just worship, so we don't, even if you don't understand it, you understand it's a ritual. But this is not a ritual, so what is the big deal behind these two? So nobody will say, for example, diamonds are haram. So, diamonds are worth much more than gold. So nobody's going to say diamonds are haram for men. So a man could be bling bling, bling bling, people bling bling in diamonds. Could have, you know, like some of these people have their teeth coated in. So you could do all of this, and that's not haram. But you could wear, like, this is probably silver, presumably, presumably, right? So this could be gold, and it could be haram. But it could be, you know, laced with diamonds, and it's absolutely fine. So the question is, well, what's going on here? If we take a look at trying to understand another interesting angle, or another interesting ingredient to this equation, is that many Sahaba, companions, companions of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wasallam wa radiyallahu anhum, continued to wear silk and gold throughout their lifetimes. Now brace yourselves, people. Before you start declaring me to be a kafir, brace yourselves. I'm only don't shoot the messenger. I'm only quoting the facts. So now the question is, well, we know some companions, like for example Zubayr ibn Awam radiallahu an, Abdurrahman ibn Auf, the Prophet said to them, why don't you wear silk? He told them to wear silk because according to the narrations, they had a hakka, they had an itch. Okay, fair enough. Let's take that as a dispensation. So many ulama in the past took that as a dispensation. Firstly, some people problematized this dispensation. Dispensation meaning that it's a license because they're kind of ill. Let's say a medicinal license. Some ulama problematized this dispensation. Why? Because you got to remember, these people were from back in the days, people. The warrior times, you know, the Viking, when men were men. You know, back in those days. They were from that time. So an itch doesn't quite cut it as a, you know, like today, obviously, the likes of you and me, we're like, oh, I've got an itch. Oh, yeah, I can't go into work. I've got an itch. But back then, you know, when one guy would be walking around with an amputated arm and just pick up his arm and just carry on. It's like, they were like, men were men. Oh, you know, it wasn't like, oh, it was like, what? But it's okay. I've got another arm. You know, it's like back then. So, so an itch, hakka, didn't quite cut it for them. But some people thought, look, okay, maybe it was a serious itch. Like it's like a rash kind of thing going round. Fair enough, fair enough. Let's roll with it, let's roll with it. So, wow, 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 wow. Look at that. Kya baat hai, kya baat hai. Right, so some people thought, let's just take it as a medicinal license, a dispensation. Other people, so many of the Salaf now thought, look, you know what, I'm not buying this whole dispensation thing. So what they did is they said, this silk that Zubayr ibn Awam radiallahu an, and even Abdullah ibn Zubayr used to wear, the son of Zubayr, they said, well, maybe it was mixed silk. So maybe it wasn't pure silk, it was mixed. Rafay, natty. Maybe the itch is in a place where only someone special can go. Right, so look, so they said maybe this silk is mixed silk. So it's not pure silk, it's like an equivalent, I'm not saying it was this, but let's say it's an equivalent of like cotton and silk, or I don't know, wool and silk woven together. So there was a cloth which came out, and when I say came out, sorry, became prevalent in the time of the Salaf, and that cloth was known as khaz. And it was like a cloth made out of silk, but it was also mixed in with other kind of materials. So they said, well, khaz is what it must have been then. And therefore, khaz is categorically fine. So most the ulama say that khaz is absolutely fine. You know, you have that poem, that لو لبس الحمار لباس خز لقال الناس يا لك من حماري. That if the donkey came out wearing attire or clothes of khaz, of this kind of silk, refined artificial silk, people would have said, wow, what a donkey. Meaning that even when they tried to praise it, they still ended up cussing it and dissing it. Because at the end of the day, it's still a donkey. So they just said, wow, what a donkey. I'm sorry. Anyway, coming back to this. Right, so some ulama made a dispensation of saying, well, that's what it is. The problem persists. Let me continue. The problem persists. شايفك إلى أين المفر ستلتقي به سألتقي بالله شكرا يا أمين فإني قبل اليوم لم أكن أعرف ذلك. Amin just told me I'm going to end up meeting with my Lord. So I said, yeah, thanks. I wasn't really aware of that before today. Right, so the thing is now, okay, so let's move on. There's another ingredient to this equation that problematizes it, and that is that several other companions, Imam Shawkani in the Nail al-Awtar brings up to 20 companions, which include many companions. You've got in that Bara ibn Azib, there's I believe Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, there's many other, he brings a list of companions, up to 20 companions who continued to wear silk, absolute silk, right throughout their lives. Now, based on that, Imam Shawkani concludes by saying, I don't believe that silk is haram, that it is only makruh. It is discouraged because that's what he says. Similarly, you have other ulama bringing up to Izzuddin ibn Abd salam. Sorry, I stand corrected. Ibn Daqiq al-Eid brings up to 5 companions, including Bara ibn Azib, Suhaib, Imam Suhaib, there's a few others, but he brings at least 5 and other examples of companions. Anas bin Malik, these very close and prominent companions who died and up until their death wore gold. So it's interesting that, you see, you've got, this is the equation. Now many people feel that right, many people feel, sorry, I just gotta block some trolls. Right, so many people feel the gold is just categorical haram. Some ulama felt that it wasn't. It was either makruh, based on it being to kind of keep people away from that luxury. And that's what I'm in line with. I'm in line with these kind of ulama on this mas'ala. I feel that what the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was advising these people was that because they lived in a very rough and tough kind of world, we're being on edge, or being on edge doesn't sound right, but being on kind of standby for the necessary threats that they were facing, and just the kind of pressures that the community was being engulfed by, it wasn't the time to be indulging in these kind of luxuries. Right? Your nose is bigger than your face. Zayar topic. Ab kya kare? What can we do? There's only so much that my DNA could play with. My DNA was like, oh, what the hell, man. There's only, you know, like, come on, give us some play. Well, well, I hope. Don't worry, I'll go into, right, Ziyar, I'll come into your I'll come into your profile later on Snapchat, and then you'll see my response. Right, so now coming back to this. Right, so the point is that that the Prophet was trying to keep these people focused. That you have to stay focused. Okay. That you are in very serious times. It's not that things, you know, it's like if somebody, for example, imagine you've got some serious stuff going down and somebody says, oh, well, I'm just going to take a spa day. And you think like, you know, you're going to make me swear. You think like, spa day, is that, you know, do you understand the kind of seriousness that we're in? So it's a bit like that. So in this understanding, that the Prophet, when he told people off from gold and silk, I fall in line with those ulama who felt that this was, who felt that this was to do with the karaha and to keep people focused. But if people want to, if they want, you know, like generally the popular opinion is that it's haram, and that's fine. You don't need to follow my understanding. I'm just saying, okay. Right, let's move on, people. In my understanding, wearing the niqab is not a prescribed, right, just move up. Is not a prescribed nor a recommended act by the Prophet. Something which the wives of the Prophet, Hamza al-Hanafi. Okay, that's a good question. I've been asked this before. And let's go into that about niqab. Okay, so stay focused, people. Once again, we're going to go on an analytical walk. So bear with me. Right, those of you just tuning in, if you click like, click share, get the live feed out there, let other people join in. Let them partake in this blessed or wretched kind of Monday night ritual, people. Monday night ritual. So the hijab and niqab. Hijab is interesting because I highly advise people to always look into things like discourse analysis. To Brian Ski, first read the 9th surah. I'll come to the 9th surah. I take it you're talking about Surah Tawbah. Right, but let's just focus on the question at hand. Sorry, all these fizzy drinks, right? So, now, right, hijab, I always advise people to focus on discourse analysis. Why? Because look at how discourses were born. This term hijab, the Arabic word hijab exists, and it's existed since, you know, since Arabic. But using hijab to mean an Islamic covering is very modern. Now, you see, this is interesting. So all these people going on about like hijab, 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 the terminology is a very modern terminology, just 20th century. We're really talking 19th century, maybe 20th century, definitely. It's a very kind of, it's in line with the colonial era. This talk comes about this definition of hijab. I stand corrected, this discourse of the term hijab. Why is this interesting? Because somebody could say, yeah, but covering up existed. Yes, it did. Of course it did. Covering up is not new. But this discourse of hijab, you see, hijab is today used to mean the kind of head cloth that women wear, which traditionally in Arabic was called khimar. Now, you see, khimar, there is no hot topic in the past about khimar. There is no books written about khimar. You hardly even see the ulama discussing khimar. Hardly. They discuss awra, the woman should cover, they do this, satrul awra, things like this, covering up, being modest, but they don't even, they have the word khimar, which is like a cloth you wear on your head, but they don't, this is not part of the discourse. Why is this important? This is important because with a discourse comes a focus. Now bear with me, people. In the 20th century especially, and the 19th century, 20th century, there appears this discourse about hijab all of a sudden. It is the head cloth, and it's now not only got a terminology, it's got a huge, it has become the discourse. It has become the defining factor for Muslim identity and for enforcing or for embracing or however people want to see it. Hijab, this term, this discourse, with the term hijab did not exist like this. So you show me books that were written or dedicated to things like the khimar. Historically, they weren't ever. The people never. Are you telling me women never? There were no women who didn't cover up in the past. Of course, there were countless women who didn't cover up in the past. So, what I'm trying to say is, when you want to shift a focus, you have to first of all create definitions. You have to create a discourse. So what people did, I'm not saying this is necessarily malicious or malign, but I'm just stating it as an observer. I'm not passing judgment. You can, what I'm trying to say is that this is how people work. When you need to shift focus, when you need to create a discourse. To create a discourse, you need definitions. With definitions, you can create emphasis and place limits. This all ties back into control, exerting control. And I want to come back to this in a moment, right? So I'll come back to this thing about control and how that ties in to the human psyche, the human will to power. It is one of our most powerful instincts. But I want to come back to that. So this thing, hijab, all of a sudden becomes a discourse. And the focus is all about women covering their hair. That's really interesting. Because why? Why all of a sudden? Why not about covering their bodies? Why about covering their head? And this term hijab is then used with such confidence and retrospectively placed on our entire tradition. It is used as though this has been like this since the time of the Prophet. But it hasn't. The Prophet didn't ever use the word hijab like this. Neither did the Salaf, neither did the scholars, neither did this wasn't used like this. So this is very, the usage, I'm not saying covering the head as a concept didn't exist. It did. It did exist. But, right, it did exist, but the emphasis wasn't there. The discourse wasn't there. So just to clarify, it's not that I'm saying What am I saying? Right, as Ghalib says that बक रहा हूँ जुनून में क्या क्या कुछ ना समझे खुदा करे कोई. Ghalib, the Urdu legendary poet, he says that what nonsense am I chatting in my state of insanity, that, you know, may God make it so that nobody understands what. Right, anyway, coming back to this, so let's stay focused. So the thing is, hijab, what we're using today, is a modern discourse, although part of the discussion does exist in the past. So this thing of covering the hair does exist in the past, but it wasn't a discourse per se, that it wasn't this whole narrative constructed with power and a huge emphasis. It didn't exist like that as a narrative. If there were no books ever written on it, this whole discussion doesn't even appear like that in the books historically. But once you give it a term, you create a discourse, you write books on it, it becomes the thing, hijab. So it's interesting, that's all I'm saying. Moving on to niqab. Niqab is, right, so niqab is the covering of the face. Okay, that is done by mainly women, although some men may do that as well. Now, right, so just to दिल खुश हुआ मस्जिद वीरान देख कर मेरी तरह खुदा का भी खाना खराब है. वाह वाह, मान गए. I like it. That's oh damn, have I swiped the... By the way, whenever I'm moving forward doing this, I'm not blocking people, just in case you're wondering. Sometimes I need to read the questions and I gotta pause them, and that's what I'm doing. Right, so let's take a look at this. Let's focus at this concept of niqab, the covering up. The Malikiya are very... Okay, let's go back, first of all, to the Quran and the Sunnah. There is a difference of opinion on the niqab. However, the Quran and Sunnah have never taught for a woman to cover her face. And this is not from the teachings of the Quran, and it is not from the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So let's just clarify that. I'm not saying that ulama haven't said this. So I'm not lying. I'm being honest about this. Right. So in no hadith, in no verse of the Quran was a woman ever instructed to cover her face. Ever. Right. So now, and in fact, women are told off from covering their face, especially in certain acts of worship, and I'll come to that. Now, the ulama disagreed. Okay. The ulama disagreed about covering of the face. Many, like Imam Malik, the Maliki madhab, Imam Abu Hanifa, the Hanafi madhab, recognized that this is not from the Kitab wa Sunnah, to cover the face. The Shafi'iyya and the Hanabila took a slightly different approach, and they believed that niqab was from, although it's not in the Quran or Sunnah, but it's from the spirit of the Quran wa Sunnah. Right, so I'm just saying. Right, so okay, so it's not from, it's from the spirit of the Quran wa Sunnah, they felt. Okay. Now I'm gonna carry on. I've not stopped there. They felt that this was kind of from this whole spirit, and some people practiced this. The question here was that, yes, people in the time of the Prophet did used to cover their face, but was that practice due to cultural practices, because they lived in a desert, that kind of stuff. They lived in desertous kind of surroundings. There was sand, people traveled. Even the men would often do talthim, which is covering the face. They would wear turbans, they would cover everything, cover themselves from the heat, cover themselves from the dust. Is that why the men and women were doing this? Or is it because it was religious? So the scholars who came after, some of them said things like, and I know the Hanafiya were more stronger on this from the Maliki. So the Shafi'is and the Hanbalis kind of felt it was from the spirit. They took it as, no, it was part of an Islamic teaching. Right, which I disagree with. And as does Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa, and these people didn't accept that. The Hanafiya and some of the Malikiya said, oh, this, a woman should cover her face as a safeguarding measure. Now, the question here was, what was meant by safeguarding? This was the question. So they said, saddan lidhari'a, or min khashyatil fitna, out of fear of tribulations. Now, what did this mean? Some people understood this to mean, well, oh, right, there's danger and safety, and you don't want to go against a cultural norm and things like this. That is fine. Some people felt, oh, this is a fitna of the woman being too beautiful. Right. Now, in all honesty, I highly doubt that that interpretation to be true. But if some people may have gone with that, okay, maybe in the past, in some remote areas of the world, that kind of stuff held true, that if a woman exposed her face, it was everybody collapsed. It's got us wondering, what did she look like? But in most cases, that was never, I doubt it, that was ever the case. So when you look at the sources, like somebody asked about Imam Malik is asked about women eating with people they're not related to, so a woman and her husband having a meal with her husband's friends. And Imam Malik said there's no problem with things like this. Obviously, she wouldn't be eating with a niqab in front of her face. She wouldn't be going to... So that kind of stuff, you know, so Imam Malik didn't have an issue with these things. Now, what is interesting is how the later Maliki have explained this. So Imam Dasuqi and Sheikh Dardir in his summary of the... You have... which is really the summary of Khalil. In his fatwa, in his book, he writes that this is makruh for a woman to do the niqab. It is discouraged for her to do the niqab. And then, now in the commentaries upon that, people will say, they said, fi salah, or fi ghayriha. And the Suqi further adds to this. He says, لِأَنَّهُ مِنَ الْغُلُوِّ فِي الدِّينِ, that this, it is discouraged for her to cover the face inside salah or in other than salah. مِنْ أَجْلِهَا أَوْ لَا, even if it's for the salah or not. The Suqi says that لِأَنَّهُ مِنَ الْغُلُوِّ فِي الدِّينِ, this is from extremism in Islam. These ain't modern scholars. I mean, you know, you're talking at least a century, 2 centuries ago, but people who are seen as very traditional ulama. These are like the pillars within the Maliki madhab of the later age, people who get the kind of, you know, who are pushed as the final say in the madhab. These are those kind of people. Imam Dasuqi, in his Hashia, he writes that this, he writes that fi salah or fi ghayriha, that this is from ghulu fi din, this is from extremism in religion. A woman trying to cover her face, whether it's for salah or generally. He then does add, he says, however, in the Maghrib, and the Suqi is from Egypt. He says in the Maghrib, in northwest Morocco, that kind of region, I mean, he says there's a certain region where women cover their face like this. Now, he says, well, if it's the practice of a people as an urf, he uses the term ada. It's like the custom of a people that this is how they dress. He says in that case, it's okay if it's their dress, but it's not Islam. Now, this is the same thing that Sheikh Ahmed Taha Rayyan, who is the legend amongst the dons of the Malikiyah today. He is one of the most senior authorities in Maliki fiqh in the world today. He's one of the elite shuyukh of Al-Azhar. You have his clip on YouTube where he's saying the same thing. He's asked, is niqab fard or sunnah? He says it is not fard, it is not sunnah. He says this is from the adat of people, that some people do this. We don't take this as a matter of religion. If they wanted to do it, that's their thing. Right, now from a evidence perspective, right, you get the ikhtilaf coming from the verse of the Quran where Allah says, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ to women, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ إِلَّا لِبُعُولَةِ. But this, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ, that the women, that they shouldn't be so exposing themselves with all their beauty. إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا, except that which is apparent anyway from it. Now this, the ulama have always disagreed in what does إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا mean, except that which is apparent. So when you say that إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا, except what is apparent from a woman's beauty, let's say, what does that mean? So in the past, commonly people said face, hands, things like this. I like what Imam Nasafi said. Imam Nasafi, famous Hanafi scholar. Time to mix the drinks, people. My sons of anarchy. Alright. Right, so right now the thing is, what Imam Nasafi said is that he says إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا, he says مَا جَرَتِ الْعَادَةِ, what the customs of a people run by in a woman generally exposing and demonstrating, like kind of like having casual. He said إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ, and then he goes on in his time in saying, well, casually that might be the face and so on. But this is interesting, you see, that he said إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا ties into convention, because that is the truth. That is all it actually does. It ties into custom and convention. Okay. So now, and let me add to that as an example. So you see people like Ibn Abbas radiallahu an, a great companion, and people like Abu Yusuf, the legendary Abu Yusuf al-Qadi, the legendary Hanafi supreme judge of the Muslim world. His and the student of Abu Hanifa, their understanding was that a woman does not need to, in Islam, even that the, if we want to call it hijab or whatever, doesn't even cover the forearms. They said that this does not even cover that. Why? Because they said that's what the ada, by custom, women don't cover. The Hanafiya, the same thing with things like feet. They said this doesn't apply to things like this. Now it's interesting that even when you look at what, like, so earrings, or when Imam Malik is asked about these kind of things like jewelry that a woman wears, and bracelets, and things like anklets, and Imam Malik said, no, this is not from the kind of that, this is like just common stuff that all women wear. And he said that they don't need to stop wearing things like this casually, meaning that this was, he said, إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْ, this is apparent the apparent kind of stuff, and this is in his age. What is interesting is many people today would consider that to be, oh my God, you know, from the Islamic vibe, so to speak. Yes, so Imam Malik, I believe that is actually in the Mudawwana, where he's asked. But I mean, you can easily bring that up as well, the reference of where Imam Malik is actually saying that, if you just put it in. But I'll most likely try to put up the exact reference later on. So Imam Malik is asked about things like this jewelry, and he says, no, that's fine. Now, that is my point of saying this, and I want to finish off by also taking us back to some hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and beginning with the hadith of Al-Mar'at al-Khath'amiyya, the woman from Khath'am, who asks the Prophet in the Hajj some questions, and she clearly isn't covering her face and things like this, and Fadl, the Prophet's nephew, is constantly eyeing her up, and, you know, according to the hadith, he's going up and down, and that's in Sahih Bukhari. So that hadith is a clear evidence. I'd like to quote another hadith as an evidence. The hadith of Ibn Abbas, once again, which is in... This hadith is in Bukhari. This hadith is in Bukhari, that he says that I saw when the Prophet admonished people and women were there. He says that I saw the women yahwina ila huluqihinna wa adhanihinna, that they were reaching to their ears and taking off their kind of earrings and giving them in charity. And so this was clearly showing that he was witnessing that. It wasn't that they were all covered, otherwise he couldn't see, he couldn't kind of refer to that. Another hadith, once again in this is in Tirmidhi, and I believe it's in Bukhari as well. Similar hadith, that when the Sahabi says that when the Prophet was admonishing people, that this woman got up, Safa'a'ul Khaddain. Okay, she had these kind of like almost like, you know, like weathered kind of like cheeks, Safa'a'ul Khaddain, and she addresses the Prophet. And how was he seeing that, unless it was common? Unless that was the phenomenon. Another example, there's a hadith which is in Sahihain. It's transmitted by Imam Malik. It's transmitted in Abu Dawood, and that's the hadith of Subayya al-Islamiyya, that she, after she, her husband, who dies around Hajjatul Wada, she is visited by Abu Sanabil ibn Ba'kak, I believe. And he says to her, whoa, you look all... And he visits her at home and says that, wow, you look all... he says, Araki, you know, mutajammi. He says, you're all kind of all done up, showing your beauty. كَأَنَّكِ تَرْجِينَ النِّكَاحِ, as though you are looking to get married. And it mentions the general commentary. She had all the henna on and stuff like this. And she says, yeah, I am. And he says, no, you can't, because your husband just died and you need to wait for this long. But she had given birth, and that finishes the iddah. So what happens is she goes and asks the Prophet, and the Prophet says, no, you're right. After pregnancy, the iddah is over and you can marry whoever you please. And then Abu Sanabil is the one who marries her. So he couldn't have been like a brother. It's okay, I'm your brother. This kind of... So anyway, so this goes to show the kind of interactions and the kind of that they weren't covered in niqab. And going back to Imam Dasuqi's point, that this is ghulu fi din, this is from extremism in religion, if you consider it to be religion, but it's maybe custom. It can be done if it's just the habit of a people, but not Islam. Right, that's enough on that. Let's move on, people. The athar in tafsir are generally weak, yes. That women covered everything except one or two eyes, yep, that's generally weak. Right, so... Right, people, let's get into some of these questions. Can you recommend any online lectures about discourse analysis? See, it's difficult because I don't think there is much like that, unfortunately. It's just having a particular outlook. I did say I'd like to do a small video on it. Inshallah, I will, hopefully. But I love the way, like some books, like I've recommended in the past that book, Sapiens. And I love the way he has it applied right throughout his book. Although he doesn't refer to it. And he doesn't refer to them as discourses. He refers to them just generally as stories. But that's what he means, discourses. Cool. So that's, if you want to see applied, you can read his book or listen to it. But Foucault, yes, of course. I mean, Foucault absolutely is a key kind of contributor to discourse analysis. And especially on the power structures. But I mean, you can YouTube or Google, but I don't know any personally something to advise you to watch that's so awesome. But I'm sure there are plenty of things out there. Do I respect Christian people's rights? Of course I do. I advocate the rights of all human beings, as does Islam. What are your thoughts on damaging the environment? Through things like petrol cars. I mean, I do believe that environmental things have to be taken seriously. I don't know about people like you and me on our scale. I mean, obviously, we acknowledge it on our scale and adopt it, but I mean, on a governmental kind of level, these things have to be acknowledged. Things like Donald Trump kind of pulling out of the whole agreement on climate and things like this, and the treaty, and these kind of things are a disappointment. But I mean, it has to be acknowledged at a more national level. Right, so okay people, those of you just tuning in, if you click like, click share, get this out there, live feed, let's take a look at some of these questions. I'm just trying to get into this. Right, okay, damn. What is your opinion on Muslims affiliating Masonic practices, symbolisms, initiations? I'm not really sure what that means, really. Some people, Muslims, are just obsessed with this Freemason kind of stuff, Masonic this and Masonic that. I'm not really too fussed about all of these kind of things. I mean, look, our faith isn't that weak, okay? You do whatever you gotta do. Not everything is an attack on Islam, and Islam it's not that weak that the moment you shake hands with somebody, or if you do something with an organization that now your faith has disappeared. That I don't feel anyway, in my understanding, that's the Islam. That's my kind of Islam anyway. Thoughts on kombucha? Siam Hussein. Kombucha, from what I believe, is a kind of fermented drink or something based on yeast, or semi-fermented. I don't know too much. I mean, I've never tried it. So, you see, it's interesting because I could be wrong because I don't know too much about it. But I think it's semi-fermented and not fully fermented, or partially fermented or not. And I think that triggers a very powerful debate which existed once in early Islam about bar wine, apart from things like wine and so on, just some fermentation in a drink that is not wine. Why must that be haram? And the Hanafiya it was beginning with Imam Abu Hanifa, were the key proponents of this argument, and they argued it very passionately. And Imam Abu Hanifa, in fact, Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani in his book Kitab al-Athar brings several narrations from Sayyidina Umar drinking drinks which are partially fermented. So if you drank them in large quantities, you would get drunk, but they would water them. So the hadith that he brings, the athar he brings, is that Sayyidina Umar is sitting with somebody and they take out this drink which is, you see, it's like nabidh, and this was what their nabidh was, and he takes a sip and he says, whoa, that's too strong, and then he mixes some water with it, and then he says, whoa, this is a lot better now, and then drinks it. Now, and then Imam Muhammad goes on to bring other narrations of companions doing this, and he then brings the quote of Imam Abu Hanifa as well, saying that, look, if you gave me the world and everything in it, I would not declare nabidh to be haram, because I know the companions drank it. So it opens up this very powerful kind of discourse and debate. The issue is that over time, Islam has, like other religions, it's been institutionalized, it's been we've had standardized versions have been produced as part of power structures. We've had, there's a lot of, it's obviously tied into empire, it's tied into control. And once you get kind of standardization of religion, it kills off, it censors debate and discussions, and then it just becomes known through this particular thing. So today, to discuss things like this, I don't think we'd really have, I don't think it would really, it would be able to really discuss it, because the whole culture, I mean, we could discuss it, but I don't think, it's just, I don't know, it'd just be a mess of a discussion. Exactly. I think Jamie Edmondson says that's why we separated church from state. To be fair, in Islam, Islam was never as tied into empire or state the way Christianity was tied into the state with the church. So Islam had never had that perspective never had that kind of reality to it anyway, historical reality. With Islam, I think the power structures came more from the clergy. So it was kind of like soft power. People who maybe don't have too much power but then want power. So they exert religion as a source of power. So whereas in Christianity, the church became the kind of state, if you like. And the rivalry was between the church and the state. The church and the state. Is it Gregory or Henry IV? I mean, they're fighting and battling it out, trying to excommunicate each other, and this is going on and that's going on. But it's not, you see, in Islam that was never the case. The kings or the dynasts or the so-called caliphs were never really battling it out with ulama. We don't have that kind of papacy structure in Islam. But it was naturally ulama at times, some ulama and others, who themselves create part of these power structures and exert control. Right, so the thing is that there are power structures, and it gets tied into that kind of imperial culture, but not like the way in Christianity. So, right, moving on, people, moving on. Is spirit vinegar halal? Of course, kulsum, spirit vinegar is halal. And as the Prophet said in a hadith, which is in Tirmidhi, that ni'mu khallikum, the best of your vinegar is khallu khamrikum, is the vinegar of your alcohol. That's a hadith, see, people, in Tirmidhi. So the point is that yes, of course, once it's vinegar, it's vinegar. What is the worst movement in the last 100 years, the Wahhabis or feminism? Feminism, huh? What is it? कलकत्ते का तूने जो जिक्र किया ए हम नशी एक तीर जो मेरे सीने पे मारा के हाय हाय. That's a poem of Ghalib. He says, speaking of a thing like a particular city which is in India, he says, oh, you mentioned that city, and by doing so, he says you shot an arrow. But the thing is that, look, I think it's interesting. I'm not about these movements. You see, I think all these movements start off with good intentions, and I'm all for, let me just say from the offset, I'm all for women's rights, women having rights, women, that equality, that there shouldn't be discrimination based on gender, there should be equal opportunities, and I'm all for demythologizing or kind of culturalizing Islam from these kind of fatwa which are used to kind of suppress women. And they're very kind of, if I may use the term, kind of like seen as misogynistic views, like things like we said earlier, that a woman must cover everything, and some scholars said even one eye, because she's got one anyway, why use two, that's excess. So that kind of, these attitudes, I'm all for that. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely am. And I've stood in the face of criticism defending, and I will still defend my stance on these kind of things, on women having the equal things. And I've been one of the few people who's outright said that this thing of like blood money that they use, the compensation for accidental death, it is absurd to claim that there should be a distinction between males and females. They should be the same. So and many ulama don't support me when I say these kind of things. I've said things like there's no restrictions on women traveling, there's no restrictions on women wishing to marry. If a woman wants to divorce, it's her right, her choice. The man cannot stop her. I've made that very clear, that women have the right to whatever, obviously the laws on covering awra, modesty are there in Islam. I've promoted, I've stated them as they are, but other things like women cutting hair, plucking eyebrows, all these things are permissible. There's no prohibitions on any of these things. I've said women wearing makeup, as Sheikh Dadu has said, is permissible. There's nothing wrong. They can take photographs, they can take selfies. Although I'm not saying you get sucked into that kind of a culture, this Instagram culture, I think is harmful for people, men or women, but I think this thing is permissible in Islam. Now, so just from the offset to clarify, I'm not a person that is against any of these things, but I do see the dangers of this thing which I refer to as ultra feminism, and it is this kind of man-hating culture, and I think it's interesting, because I think in our society men and women have been kind of pitted against one another. And a lot of this comes back to, there were some other questions I was being asked. And this actually ties in with a few questions I've been asked. So I can kind of sum them into one and tackle them. So somebody was asking about things like relationships. Somebody was asking about these whole scandals that have been going on. Somebody was asking about the courting process. So all of these can kind of get tied into this discussion. Look, I believe that part of what we're suffering from is coming to terms with modernity. Right now, I am not anti-modernity. Let's clarify that, which is obvious. I've already said all this eyebrow threading, everything is permissible. Right, so for whoever's asking. Now, I actually think that we are living in an awesome age. I love the age we're living in. It is an age of true kind of discovery. We are living in an exhilarating kind of age of breakthroughs. I mean, it is so wow. Wallahi, in my understanding, if you were given a choice to ever live in a particular time, it would be now. That's me as a person. I'm not saying you have to agree with me, but that's my understanding. So I do love the age we're in. I'm not saying it's far from perfect, but I think it's an amazing, exhilarating kind of age. So, and I just don't. I mean, I don't want to get all religious, you know, like some people have a religious utopian, oh, I would have liked to live in the time of the Prophet, and for the Prophet I would have, you know, I mean, you can keep all suspend the Islamic kind of exaggerated romanticism for a moment. I'm just being real, okay? Most of these people would not have been happy to have lived in that time, okay? Just being honest with you. You know, when you don't have things like when people would, these kind of people, if they starved for 2 days in a row, everything would change. Let alone this kind of approach. If somebody came at them with a sword and chopped their hand off, it wouldn't be this kind of. So, you know, when people say all these kind of nice romantic things, it just sounds nice to hear. It's not very real, so let's just put that aside. Right, okay, but human beings are struggling with modernity. We are a very new species, okay, in that sense, as in our domination of the world and of the globe is very new. Human beings, when we are in essence animals, okay, in Arabic, when you define humans, insan, the definition, you can go to any scholar or go to Google, the Islamic so-called definition of human is hayawanun natiq, an animal that is capable of reasoning. That is the definition of insan, okay, according to the Arabic Islamic sciences. So you study this in madrasa, that Islam, when we're defining insan, we say hayawanun natiq, a creature, an animal that has the ability to reason. So we are just animals at the end of the day, but we're above. We have this ability. We are still creatures. Now, what's happened is in modern times, we're really confused in trying to understand ideals, reality, dreams, humanism, things like all of these things are, you know, like people are like, there's this kind of thing that, and I'm not condemning this, but I'm just saying this is kind of, hey, achieve your dreams, go live your dreams, you know, like, but people don't know, you know, for once in human history we do have opportunities, but we don't know what to do. Like, well, what does that mean, like, live my dreams? And people are like, yeah, just be you, you know. What does that mean? Truly down to this. So some people will be like, and then we have things like, you know what? At the end of the day, everything is for love. And we're like, wow, that sounds so nice. What does that mean? And all this is going on. So in very recent, this is just within, this is less really than 100 years, less than almost 100 years. We have had this huge thing of romance. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm not passing judgment on it. But I'm just saying cinema and novels and things like this have kind of really flooded this concept of romanticism. Ideal romanticism has been placed out there. Now, I'm sure, it sounds nice. It sounds really nice. You know, it sounds really like all lovey-dovey, these kind of things. But if you go prior, let's say from the 19th century backwards, people didn't live like that. Most of human history was never like that. Human history, people just kind of got on with it. But for once we're in a time where we are, on Maslow's hierarchy, we're above the basic needs of survival. So we've got time to think. And then we're like, you know, wouldn't it be nice to in the pursuit of love, in the pursuit of... But the problem is that we are still creatures, which we're forgetting. You see, so this is now what I'm about to say may come off as very controversial to some people, but I'm just reiterating science. This is what psychology says. Okay. So you have to understand, this is what science says. That you see, look, yes, these things are nice and they're awesome, but especially there are some distinctions between men and women, male and female, if you haven't noticed already. And the question is that men, especially male species, right throughout humans and other species, they have always been, primates and mammals and humans, they have been just polygamous non-stop. The male species is psychologically obsessed with sex. I'm just gonna look, I'm just some people might hate me for saying this, but I'm just being honest. It's like, and our problem has been in modernity in trying to get round these things, because people don't like these things because it doesn't sound politically nice. It doesn't sound politically correct. Okay, so people are like, well, it doesn't tie into these ideals. But this is a reality. So what do we do about that? So how does this work? And the problem is it doesn't work. I mean, maybe it's just a problem. So we've got all these ideals, we've got things, we've got this, but the male species doesn't generally operate in that way. It does it for a short while, but then the male brain is all over the place. And this is what causes all these issues. It causes these... and then when it causes breakdowns in relationships, I feel this is what has given rise to this ultra-feminism, in hating on men for being like this. But then, you see, the issue is I don't think men can generally change it, because it's hardwired into their instincts. And if they do change it, if this does change, it will take an evolutionary process. It wouldn't change overnight. It wouldn't change within decades or hundreds of years, because we have been, the male species are like this. So it's not just men, it's the male species. So, I read this report. It said, men, and it said men think about the deed. Men think about this every 11 seconds. And it's the kind of thing that all men will suddenly be like they'll be like, what? They'll be like putting on that acting face. Really? And they'll be like, damn, that's so accurate. But anyway, and I feel that the problem with this is right. I feel that the problem with this is Muslim scholars are kind of stuck, because they too start getting asked questions like this, and right, they too start getting asked questions about this, but they start to come out with these Islamic ideals. Sorry, these, not Islamic, but these ideals. Like, oh, brother, or people shouldn't be like this. It's all about the akhirah. It's all about this. Desires are momentary. Rise, become like angels. Oh, fast. Oh, do this. Oh, do that. Now, the thing is that if you preach like this, it's the issue with it is you see, this is the catch-22. People want you to preach like that because they want to look up to higher ideals. So this is why ulama preach like that. the catch-22 is, if you do preach like that, it's not real and nobody can live up to it, generally speaking. The odd person may, but generally speaking, they won't live up to it. So it then becomes a problem for people who then feel that they have failed in terms of Islam because they can't live up to these ideals. And it fails for these scholars too, because they too are just humans. So then there's all these things about, oh, you know, this scholar, he's talking about this. Oh, why is he talking to a woman? Why is this happening? Because these ideals have been set. So I hope that ties into all of those questions. So it's not that I have... the reason I brought that up is I think we just need to be wary about some movements that may just hate on an entire species of, because it's not going anywhere positive, that's all. So I hope that's, inshallah, you know, of some benefit. As to how much interaction can a couple have if they're looking to get married, they can, look, there's no, just do things naturally. Just do whatever you got to do. Please do not ask to be micromanaged by Islam. Do not ask to be micromanaged by God. Allah gives you freedom. Live by it. You know, God has given you freedom. If you want to talk, look, a person says, oh, I'm interested in getting married, or I'm interested in doing this. They do whatever they do. I mean, you don't need, Islam isn't going to govern you. Islam isn't going to govern you by saying, oh, this is how you must interact. You must sit like this. Both of you must be facing the Qibla. You may now begin a conversation. It will last for precisely 3 minutes and, I don't know, 12 seconds. 13 seconds. So now you can respond. The wali must be present. Oh, you want to talk to her. Her wali must be present. What kind of an awkward conversation would that be? You want to talk to her wali should be... that would be one hell of an awkward conversation, wouldn't it? If there's a... You know, somebody says, oh, if you want to talk to the opposite gender, have their dad present. I mean, what the hell? It's like, what kind of sick stuff are you into? Anyway, people. So, let's get another question going. Before all these fatwa of kufr are thrown against me. Is secularism compatible with Islamic teachings? This is an interesting question because it then says, P.S. If you are asked to run an Islamic government, how will you run it? Rafi, the thing is this. So, look, I'm just, you know what it is? I'm just being human. Unapologetically human. That's all. Why should I have to apologize for being a human? I'm not trying to offend people. I'm just being real. That's all. Keep it real. That's what does Ghalib say? He says, "Sadiq hu apne qawl mein, Ghalib khuda gawah. Sach kehta hu ke jhoot ki aadat nahi mujhe." That's he says that I'm just being truthful in what I say, and Allah knows it. That I speak the truth because I'm not accustomed to speaking lies. That's the thing. Right, coming to Rafi's question here about governance in the name of Islam. You see, when people say secularism, you have to understand what that means. Secularism in different parts of the world means different things. Okay. Islam traditionally, Muslims traditionally, Muslim history traditionally. What a waste of 10, 11 seconds. Right, so Muslims traditionally, right, in our history didn't have a kind of theocratic governance. The rulers, Muslim rulers, kings, dynasts, didn't really get involved with religion like that. If whatever you're calling secular today, Muslims pretty much lived like that, pretty much, not exactly on these full freedoms, but pretty much like that throughout our Islamic history almost. For the most of our Islamic history, there was never interference with religion, usually from a kind of authoritarian, a statutory perspective. The state didn't, I'm calling it state, the empire, the dynast, didn't really get involved in religion apart from where it politically suited them. So it might have been, for example, that some scholars have made a big deal about somebody and they're saying, oh my God, this person's a so-and-so, he needs to be punished, or this person needs to be that. And then the kings may have thought, you know what, okay, I'll tell you what, there's too much of a fuss here. Let's do this to keep that position, that power. So people will look at me like, yeah, like you're doing it, you know, like that. So apart from that, they kept that. So basically, yes, they kept the... So somebody asking, yeah, they don't let you drink in Pakistan. Yeah, true, but... You see, so what you'd have is you would have scholars preaching, public perception. So the public generally felt that many Muslims have always drank alcohol, many Muslims. It's always been a part of the Muslim world, alcohol. In fact, huge poetry has always been dedicated to alcohol. But the thing is, Muslims generally have felt like the collective consciousness of Muslims has been that alcohol shouldn't be openly drunk and it shouldn't influence children. Like children shouldn't grow up seeing this as okay. Therefore, it's being drunk behind closed doors in certain wine houses, things like this. So that's what's happened historically. Now, the kings, they don't really care. They used to drink alcohol themselves most of the time. But yeah, if some scholars started making a big deal, they might, yeah, okay, kind of like, okay, you know, whatever, deal with that person. That's how it was. So historically, Muslims were very much more secular from a ruling perspective than one would imagine today. So that's the issue. So people today, the issue is that we, due to colonialism and the break off and the disconnect with our history, we don't know what it was like then. So we've made assumptions that it was some kind of Taliban state, that people walked around like the Taliban walked around, you know, mullahs, and they whipped people and they beat people up, and nothing like that. Generally throughout the Muslim world, I'm not saying as a one-off, things like that might have happened. You might have got some area was taken over by some Puritanist cult and they ruled it for maybe a little while and then it was taken back by the people. So like that it might have happened, but generally no. There were casually places known where people drank alcohol, where people did stuff, but usually they had a dedicated kind of wine house, so to speak. So you will see people, right, this is going right back to people like one of the poets who's commonly speaking about this, Abu Nawas, always about poetry, but he's in the time of the sons of Harun al-Rashid and the wine houses that were prevalent in Baghdad. He's speaking about visiting this one, visiting that one. In fact, these things historically, they were known. It's not that people didn't know where they were. They knew where these wine houses were. So it's not... So my point is that it wasn't like people just got on with it. But there's some things which were seen as public obscenity, and some things... And that may vary throughout time. So that's what I would say. Abu Muawiyah in the house, people, in the house. All right. Next question. Let's take some other questions, people. Is implanting a pig's heart permissible or controversial? Wah, a pig's heart. It's absolutely permissible, right? There's nothing wrong with these kind of things. Look, we as Muslims do not, you know what's interesting is that, look, we as Muslims don't eat pig. Okay, we don't eat pig. And yes, because of that, you know, part of growing up, people have put a taboo. But this taboo thing is actually wrong. It's not actually something which Islam gave. Islam didn't preach that this pig is this, oh, you should hate a pig. Islam didn't teach that. Like you show me once the Prophet showed disgust towards a pig. He didn't. We don't eat it. The Quran does say that it is harmful, that it carries rijs. Why was pork made haram? I don't know exactly. Maybe that, especially in the past, it carried more diseases than other animals and things like this, and that's why it was in essence made haram. I don't know. But according to the school of Medina and Imam Malik, all living life necessitates purity. Al-hayatu taqtadi at-tahara. That there is, every living organism is pure. Its saliva is pure, its sweat is pure, its tears are pure. That even a pig, if it licked the bowl of an animal, of a person, if it licked the water, that water, according to Imam Malik, according to the school of Medina, is still pure. It's not. Now, I understand you may not want to, as a person, have that. That's fine. Like, it's just like saying, you know, if some dirt fell into a drink, you might not want to have that because the dirt, it just puts you off. Although dirt is not necessarily impure. It's not, sweat is another good example. Like, you might find like a disgust to it, a natural, but it's not haram, as in it's not impure per se. It's unhygienic, but not impure. So anyway, I'm just giving this example that we seem to have this hatred towards pigs. We're not really, Islam didn't really teach us to hate pigs. It just said don't eat them. I mean, like, this is another thing. People had all these kind of fits going on about Peppa Pig. Peppa Pig. Father, George. So people are like, oh my God, so-and-so's children watch Peppa Pig. This is so un-Islamic. Why do they watch a pig? Khinzir, sur. Look, these things, relax. You can watch Peppa Pig. The only thing haram was eating pork. Allah didn't say hate the pig. I'm not saying you have to go adopt a pig. I'm not telling you to go adopt like pigs. But I'm saying this hatred thing is a cultural byproduct. It's a cultural byproduct of pork being haram. It's not something that the Prophet taught. So, for example, the Prophet was disgusted at the thought of people eating lizards. They have these big lizards. Yeah, Abu Muawiyah just made a point that Sidi Iqbal, who is one of Birmingham's finest legendary scholars, those of you who don't know him should reach out to him on Facebook. Muhammad Iqbal, I believe his name's on Facebook. One of my teachers from when I was in my teens. Now, he has said people who say, as Abu Muawiyah is quoted here, is Maliki scholar, that PIG, because we as kids as well were told you can't say pig, you have to say PIG. So we thought, oh, it's haram to say pig. Right? It's not. The word khinzir is in the Quran. The word khinzir is in the Quran. Right? So just to clarify. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong in these cartoons, like things like Peppa Pig. My own daughters watch it all the time. I mean, there's nothing, these things, look, they're just, anyway. Right, so, do I believe in an objective morality? This is a good question. I like this question. what is it? That अपने अमल का हिसाब क्या देते? सवाल ही सारे गलत थे, जवाब क्या देते? That why should we have to answer for our actions? All the questions were wrong themselves. Why should we have to provide an answer? So that's this is a question. Rafa is asking the questions here. That do you believe in an objective morality from an atheistic perspective? Why am I being asked to answer from an atheistic perspective? हमको काफिर बना डाला क्या? I'm not. But let me give it from my perspective. Right? The thing is, look. Do I believe in an objective morality? This is a really good question. I believe that we as creatures, as human beings especially, more so, we have a kind of very raw kind of morality base to us, which is very raw. It's not detailed in any way. It's just raw. And it's based on just very simple kind of elements to it. That is that we recognize that harm is no good. Like this, which basically is to do with just recognition of things like harm at a very obvious level. Very obvious level. This is what I believe. This is all I believe that humans and creatures have. That we have a fundamental kind of this compass, this kind of instinct, morality instinct, which is very raw and fundamental. But I'm going to add to this, so hold on, hold for it, wait for it. In its essence, it only recognizes just very primitive things like harm as being no good. Harm, no good. Harm, no good. That's all. But this kind of base that I'm speaking about, this instinct that we have, has huge plasticity to it. Huge plasticity. It can be massively manipulated and stretched, and it can be adaptive, and it can embrace and take in imprints of its environment. This is my understanding of what morality is amongst creatures, including humans, and more so humans. So even some primates have some understanding of some very low level kind of morality that I'm speaking about. Now, and you can see the research that's been done on that by scientists. Now, this is where insan is then adapted. And human beings are the only creature who are so vulnerable for such an extended period of time in their infancy. This vulnerable stage is so elongated with huge, not just actual plasticity, but neural plasticity. We are the only creatures to have that. Why, one may ask? Why? That leaves us so open and prone to danger. Because it is during this time, as the Messenger of Allah said, فَأَبَوَاهُ يُهَوِّدَانِهِ أَوْ يُنَصِّرَانِهِ, that his parents, his surroundings are molding him to those, what they call morals. Whether in the hadith that is Jewish or Christian or whatever. But this base is what I'm referring to in Islam, we would understand as the fitrah. That the base of it. Now this it embraces things around us. So we recognize, we're told, oh, this is no good, that's no good. Universally speaking, I don't think there is such thing as objective morality on that scale. Maybe out of the way I'm saying it, this kind of very raw level, kind of primitive morality base exists. That's what I believe. I don't believe objective morality exists as in lying is bad or drinking alcohol is bad, unless you're bringing it back to this thing of, well, oh, it's harm. And at a primitive stage, we recognize harm to be bad. So that's the only kind of thing. But I think that's a very fascinating question to really kind of take in. Many Muslims, you're right, they do believe that this is categorical, that this is and this is where they actually fall into a huge problem, really, because if morality was categorical, why is Allah saying for each different prophet we gave them shira'atan wa minhaja? We gave them a particular type of sharia. The Sharia, Ibn Ashur in his tafsir mentions that many alcohol with the other prophets was not haram. Certain things were not haram. Certain things were haram here. Certain things were halal. Why does God keep changing his mind if morality is absolute? So the thing is, absolutely, Robert has said morality is, as a simplistic definition, should be living in accordance with the laws of nature. Yes and no, because Robert, you see, living in line with the laws of nature is a difficult one, because nature is incredibly brutal. You see, we as human beings, and I wanted to come back to this point, we are driven by instincts. Creatures are driven by instincts. One of our most powerful instincts that we have, obviously, I know it's those of you in line with psychological, it's the instincts for stuff like food, instincts for the sexual instinct, but also the will to power. This kind of instinct to exert control on our environment. This is, creatures do this. This is not human specific. Humans have just taken it to a cataclysmic level, that's all. We are just so goddamn good at it, that's all. So this exerting control, this is the interesting thing, because this is an instinctual thing. We wish to exert control on people. Now, you throw religion into the mix, and you see, to some people, they will exert control like a dynast, a conqueror. They will go, you know, I don't know, conquer lands, do this, do that, actual physical force. But physical exertion of control is actually one of the weakest of its kind. Look at the alpha male as an example. Alpha male. Do I need to kind of get into kind of like character here. Wait there, let me. All right, people. That's how the alpha male. I need to be doing something like this, one of these kind of this is like a walking cane I've got, as you can see. All right. The devil. Right, so let's take a look at the alpha male. This is interesting, because if you ask people about the alpha male, their natural gut instinct reaction will be, oh, it will be the tough kind of, oh, this kind of creature or human that's all, oh. But it isn't. Like, look, you know, when scientists who study animals and who study primates, so monkeys, let's take monkeys and apes as an example. The alpha male amongst the kind of group of, let's say, 50 monkeys is not actually the strongest one amongst them. Right? The studies demonstrate that the alpha male who actually runs the tribe of the monkeys, of these primates, is actually the one who goes around getting support from the other ones. So he'll kind of like tickle, or the monkeys do the other kind of, they kind of nitpick, and he does that with other, and he kind of like caresses and touches, and he shows support in their kind of own way, the primate level. And he goes around to many people of his tribe doing that. The monkey, this is scientific. It's not the toughest monkey who runs the tribe at all. That is not, if that happens as an exception, it is definitely not the rule. The chimp, the ape that runs the tribe as the alpha male is never the toughest kind of one. It's always the one that's most strategic. Now, it's important in understanding that, you see, how do people or creatures exert control? That's what I'm talking about. And even you could take this up as humans, like the kind of mafia, for example. The guys who run the mafias and these kind of like cartels and stuff like, are never the toughest people. They're not the ones with the biggest muscles and things like that. They're the kind of ones working for these bosses. The bosses are usually like elderly men who couldn't stand a fight with even probably one of those people. But it's how they exert their control. You have to understand that, you see, this will to exert control, this instinct, is tied into us as creatures. Now, so some people, what they choose to do is they will exert that through religion. You see, they will say, so it's not just, so we come back to some of these questions. Now, earlier on, I was asked a question of, for example, can you wear silk? And I said that Imam Shawkani and these people said it's not haram. Now, you see, let's take that as an example. You see, one could say, look, if I don't want to wear silk, I won't wear silk. You know, like, if I don't want to wear silk, if I think it's haram, all I have to do is just, right, all I have to do is just not wear it. But you see, that doesn't fulfill my instinctual need to exert power. What does? You see, if I just don't, like, let's say this is silk now and I just don't want to wear it, I just have to take it off. But what I don't want other people to wear it either. You see, this is where exerting, where religion becomes instrumentalized to controlling and exerting control and power over other people. This is the problem. See, you know, with this religious thing, it's not about, oh, what does God want from me, and therefore I just won't do it. It hardly ever stops there. Hardly ever. It's always about exerting. Yes, I might give it up. I might be willing to give up happily gold, silk, all these things. Because to me, they may not mean much. But I want other people to not be able to do it either. And I will justify that through several means. I will say, oh, people will say, why are you exerting control? I will say, oh, I'm exerting control because God has told me I should be commanding the good, forbidding the evil. God has told me, once again, using this to cover up what is actually a very creature instinct to exert control. We have investigated, not to just because some people were asking, this is the same issue. We have investigated so-and-so's thing. He must repent to God. What? Who put you in control? Exerting control. That I have investigated you. I instruct you to repent to God. As this whole drama is going on in the United States, with all this kind of, and it's spread across the world, let's scrutinize preachers. These imams must be under heavy scrutiny. They are in responsible positions. Power. Let's exert power over power. There's no buzz. There's no greater buzz, is there? To take down a person of power is to exert greater power on them. It's all about power in the end. It's all about power, people. Trust me. Right? So I'm telling you that these things, it's fascinating to watch from a distance. And I'm not saying, as a human being, I'm sure I'm a part of that as well as a creature. But at least by having a recognition of these structures, it allows you to be a bit more closer to objectivity. That's all. Right, so any other question? I'll tell you what, should we take some rapid round? Let's take some rapid round questions. Is Aqiqah a pagan practice? Yes, it was. Aqiqah is a pagan practice that was practiced by pagan Arabs before the advent of Islam. When Islam came, the Prophet didn't actually encourage Aqiqah, but he allowed it to carry on because it was not threatening in any way. And I speak about that in my article. I've got an article on Facebook, a note. Guys, if you go check it out, it's called Halloween or Halaloween. Halloween or Halaloween, people. Trick or treat. I mean, I don't really know what the big deal is with people. What is the big deal, man? Gio or Ginedo? Live and let live. Look, if you don't want to celebrate Halloween, don't do it, God damn it. Right? Don't do it. It's as simple as that. But I've got this article anyway called Halloween or Halaloween, and you should read it, inshallah. And I go through this and I mention how people saying, oh my God, Halloween is a pagan practice, but so was Aqiqah. And what's interesting is Aqiqah in Islam, they actually used to do a lot of pagan stuff with it. And one of the pagan parts was after they sacrificed an animal for the newborn, they would kind of, they would take blood from the dead animal and they would kind of like smother it over the forehead of the newborn. So the kind of forehead had blood on it in the end. Now in the hadith in Abu Dawood, the Prophet said, oh, just use color instead. So you see, he told them the part that was incredibly kind of paganistic and it was too linked to their ritual, he still allowed them to imitate it. He allowed them to imitate it by using color. And many of the madhabs went on with what I feel was still part of the Jahiliyyah practice, but they went on with it in saying that you give 2 sacrifices for a boy and 1 for a girl. And they made a distinction. And Imam Malik, the Don of Medina, Allahu Akbar, he said that that's utterly unacceptable. He said it's 1 sacrifice. If you're going to do it, it's just 1 for boy or girl. It makes no difference. So you see how these practices have come through. And even Imam Abu Hanifa, when he was asked, Khala, can you take 1 book off the shelf behind you? It's just a picture. Right, is it, people? Go on then, there you go. God damn. This is Muwahibul Jalil, right? You've got here Min Adillati Khalil, but this is a commentary on Mukhtasar Khalil, one of the major Maliki fiqh manuals, which is meant to summarize a popular mainstream understanding of the school of Medina. This is obviously a versification by the Mauritanians. The Mauritanians, I gotta tell you, this is obviously by Sheikh Ahmed ibn al-Mukhtar al-Jakni. They versify everything. They just turn everything into poetry. But in this, they've brought the evidences to support it from the Quran wa Sunnah. In light of that, I will be, inshallah, teaching fiqh. I need some suggestions, people, on what platform to use. I've been thinking of maybe using Zoom. I've used WizIQ in the past, right, so I'm not sure. Some people have said maybe you should use Google Hangouts, but I want something. WizIQ in the past let me teach in a way where I could have multiple, let's say 50 students to 100, and they could chat, they could see me, they could hear me, I could share a whiteboard, and it would also allow the thing to be saved so people could access it later on, but they weren't too good in allowing it to be downloaded to, like, in regular video format to upload to YouTube, for example. So I'm taking suggestions, and their quality was just okay, not too good. So what is awesome to use as a teaching thing, some people have recommended things like Zoom or other, but if you've got any feedback, reach out to me, inshallah. Send me a private message and we'll take look at that. How can I know when you're live? How can I know when you're live in Facebook? Follow the notifications, Rahma, and yeah, and follow, like my pages. Follow my pages, both my public and private page, because I use both of them. And inshallah, like it, share it, get it out there, people. Get it out there. That's what I'm talking about. And yeah, so live, you should be able to follow notifications for whenever I have live videos. But that's awesome. Go on then. Any quick, rapid round questions, should we say? Mi'raj, was that a real body or soul? I've answered that before, Samil, in much more detail. That Qadi Iyad mentions in his Shifa that there has been huge difference of opinion since the time of the Salaf, the companions. There were people who believed it was not a real traveling. That included the wife of the Prophet, Aisha radiallahu anha, the mother of the believers, and it included people like Muawiyah radiallahu an, and that is the inclination I take, that I am inclined, and I take their understanding, which falls in line with the verse of Surah Al-Isra itself, that is that وَمَا جَعَلْنَا الرُّؤْيَا الَّتِي أَرَيْنَاكَ إِلَّا فِتْنَةً لِلنَّاسِ. We did not make this vision, ru'ya, which we showed you, except a trial for people. Many other people took this as a physical traveling, and then they disagreed whether it was a physical as the the Isra and the Mi'raj, or was it just the Isra was literal and the Mi'raj was a vision, and they disagreed. But generally, many did take it as literal and some didn't, and I don't personally take it as. What skin color did Adam have? God knows. I have no idea what Adam alayhi salam would have had. I think, it's difficult to say these kind of things, as in some people say, was he black, out of Africa, was he Homo sapiens? Generally, the understanding is that we emerged from the African continent. Now, how did they look? Allahu a'lam. Yes, there has been interbreeding along the way with Neanderthals and Denisovan man, and there's a fourth. Apparently, there's a fourth kind of species as well that we may have interbred with, but they don't know what that mystery species is. But these interbreeding, it did happen, but it wasn't. And for some reason, a lot of it, like with the Neanderthals, wasn't carried on through males. It was only through females. So that's interesting. But it's not like enough to change the species. It's done at a minute kind of level, but it does have, we do carry some genetic, there has been some, naturally, there's been certain kind of genes that have been inherited, some part of the DNA. But that's interesting. I find this incredibly fascinating, by the way. Do I teach offline? I'm supposed to be teaching at a center called the Ark in Birmingham. Inshallah, I will set that up. I just can't. You know what? I need to. One, I'm thinking, what should I resume my classes on hadith? I was thinking of doing a kind of overview. I don't know even what to describe it as. Maybe something to give. I want people who are interested in the School of Medina to have a kind of an encyclopedic access to the spirit of the school as opposed to the letter. The letter, I think I can teach elsewhere, so I can just teach books. But I want people to come to, I want Islam through this understanding of maslahah, welfare, and the Medinan way, the way of Medina, to come to life for people. So I wanted to maybe do a kind of very unstructured course, if you can call it a course, but sessions on that, in person, live, within Birmingham. But let's see. Would I come to Germany? Of course I'll come to Germany. Don't worry about it, inshallah. Reach out to me, inshallah, Samuel, and then or get your people to reach out to my people. Now reach out to me, inshallah. It'd be a pleasure. It'd be a pleasure. Are you teaching females too? Of course I teach males, females. Don't worry about it. It's all we don't discriminate. Salam, brov. Wa alaikum assalam, brov. Betty, try Yasmin Moggerhead. Okay, yep, sure, no problem. Any last? When will you come to London? Yeah, salam. Let's see. Could you sing a song? I haven't got a singing voice. I can't sing a song. God damn it. My voice to sing would be like that would be like, you know, if there's the thing not to do if somebody was about to execute me and they're having a change of heart and I decide to sing, and they'll just be like, just execute him. That's like the Socrates thing. You know, Socrates, when they put him on trial for impiety, yeah? So for corrupting the youth with his ideas. So they took the council, kind of, they made their decision, is he guilty or not? And what they came up with, well, there was a split. It was almost pretty even. So, because they had 500 people of this kind of council to make a decision, and I believe it was something like a variation of maybe 40 people in between or something like that. But it was a very close. It was very close, that the decision that is he guilty or not guilty of this crime. And so, but they found him with a subtle. It was like a Brexit kind of decision. They found him guilty just by the slightest. And then he's guilty, and now they're going to put him to execution. This is Socrates, the legend. And the way Greek kind of law had it and custom, that you could offer an alternative. So you, as the kind of defendant, could say, well, don't execute me, how about this instead? And they would have to vote on it. So, so Socrates, just being so annoyed with the kind of nonsense that these people, you know, these kind of like dimwits that these people are. So what he says is, yeah, how about you take, like, he offers a really ridiculous low sum of money. So it's like, imagine people saying, oh, we're going to execute you, would you like to offer something else? And he says, like, yeah, how about you take £5 from me? Like something so miserable. So almost 400 of these 500 people plus voted for him to be executed. That's more than the people who found him guilty. Oh God, human beings, we never cease to amuse. Well. Right, so people, I think, you know what, let's call it a wrap. It's been an awesome kind of evening, night session, vampire session, discussing. Take it easy. I'm trying to get my video on the to do with magic out before Halloween, but it may, Halloween, I take it, is it Tuesday, next Tuesday? So it'll be just before that, probably Monday, let's see. So it's a video on magic and the fact that it has no reality within Islam. So look out for that, inshallah. I'd like you all to, inshallah, make sure that you do like my just another hypocrite. Vah. Vah. Right, just another hypocrite. Well, thank you. Right, so I'd like you all to, inshallah, like my page, like both my public and my private page. I mean, what I mean by that is the two pages I've got. and share it, get it out there. If you like my videos, like it, leave a positive comment. Yeah, don't hold back, people. Be positive. Yeah, be positive. This is what, it's good to share sometimes. It's good to sometimes, as a one-off, you read, oh, that's a very nice thing somebody said. That's, oh, oh well, thank you. It's apart from the usual, you kafir, fasiq, destroying the deen, you're going to meet Allah, you're going to rot in hell, you're going to... in the words of, was it Akbar, he said, Jab Khuda se milenge to dekha jayega. Well, when it comes to meeting the Lord, well, we'll see to that then, inshallah. But my understanding of Allah is obviously very different to these people. My understanding is that God isn't as these people have understood him, but rather one of mercy and compassion. So like my pages, reach out to me. If you have messages, reach out to me. If you're on Snapchat, you can add me as Malm 2014, MALM 2014. So, alright people, with that, the words as a conclusion, that Subhanallah wa ta'ala amma yasifun, that exalted and transcendent is Allah above that which they describe him to be. Wa afdalu salati wa salam ala al-qa'il al-mamnoon, and the best of salutations and blessings upon the blessed messenger who said, al-madinatu khayrul lahum law kanu ya'lamun, that Medina is indeed better for them if but only they knew. With that, people, I'll leave you to it. Remember me in a kind dua and take very good care of yourselves. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.